ladies and gentlemen, come gather around, come gather around, come gather around. Today, we're going to be placing this sexy engine and the nasty, dirty, filthy transmission into the frame, making motor mounts, making a transmission mount, hooking up some brakes, hooking up some steering, hooking up a shifter, and something else that I can't remember what we did, but we'll probably get to it when we get there. When you're building a vehicle that's a lot different from the way the factory intended it, you got to make some changes, or you need to keep in mind some things. One is the angle of the engine and the angle of the pinion on the back axle and the angle of the drive shaft. So to make sure that I don't have any driveline vibrations on this significantly altered vehicle, I got to place the transmission and the engine and everything at a decent angle. Perhaps you need a visual. Here's your engine, angled back at about 5 degrees maybe. The drive shaft slopes a little bit more, and the pinion should match the engine angle about the same. It might be pointing downward a little bit more, so when the axle winds up under acceleration, the two angles between the engine and the pinion are the same. Now let's say you've radically lowered a vehicle and the differential is a whole lot higher than it used to be. You may run into a situation where the drive shaft is sloping upwards, and now you've got a difficult angle for universal joint to do off at the differential. You want to be between 1 and 3 degrees operating angle, but you really don't want an angle like this. This is bad. The solution in my case is to change the engine and transmission angle first and foremost. I can't drop the motor down because the oil pan cannot go below the frame, but I can raise the output of the transmission quite a bit. So I changed it to be about a little over 2.5 degrees inclined, and then because I'm using a 9-inch Ford axle, the pinion sits lower than most Chevy axles, and the pinion can match the angle of the engine but still have the U-joints in a happy place. Yay! In the previous frame video, you probably recall that we sectioned the front cross member, we removed the transmission cross member, we plated off the bottom of the X, we did a bunch of changes to make sure that nothing hangs lower than the frame. The oil pan hangs significantly below the frame now. We're going to lop 2 inches off of the oil pan. Sawzall does everything with fun, and we lopped the whole thing off. Fine and dandy. It actually cuts through it like butter. Because I'm lopping 2 inches off the bottom of the pan, I'm going to lose close to 1 liter of oil. So I figured I'll extend the front of the pan out to try to regain some of that capacity. This is closer to what the F-body oil pan looks like. I picked up a part sheet of 5052 aluminum. 6061 doesn't like to be bent, but this is what I ended up with. I don't even think I asked for a particular flavor. LS swap pans. Holley makes them. A lot of people use the F-body, Firebird, and Camaro pans. Cadillac CTS V probably, but Cadillac pans, whatever. There's a lot of different oil pans you can use. But if you have a welder, you can save a fair bit of coin. Notice the death table? Oh yeah. Turns my horizontal bandsaw into an unstoppable vertical bandsaw. The horizontal bandsaw does metal speeds. My vertical bandsaw does wood speeds. I know I've said it many times. Wood is for wheel chocks, subwoofer boxes, and protecting my drill press table. I can never remember the settings on the TIG that I want to use. It's a dirty oil pan. I put it in an oven and baked it for 7 hours at, I think, 350 degrees to try and get rid of all the oil that I could that might be stuck in the pores of the pan. Washed it with solvent, scrubbed it with a wire brush, scrubbed it with sandpaper just to try to get all the stuff out of it. And I got it relatively clean, but cast aluminum is always a bit nasty to weld. So one of the advantages of my welder is I can change how well it cleans, the cleaning action. If you change the electrode negative to be less and less electrode negative, it cleans the metal a whole lot more. If you increase the electrode negative, it welds with a deeper penetration. So trying to figure out the right AC balance that I wanted, the frequency that I wanted, I always have to look up the settings. Anyways, I got it pretty good and really went over all the welds twice just to make sure that I've got a good wet weld in there. When I was all done, there was just one little pinhole leak, but that was a super easy fix. And it holds, I think it still holds like 6 liters. I don't know. I filled it up, held it with solvent, and it still held a fair amount of oil. I also had to machine my own drain plug bung because that was cut off. So I just machined a piece of solid round aluminum, threaded it for the factory drain plug, and welded it in the bottom of the pan. I also machined and welded in my own oil drain bung. I've seen some people online just weld an AN fitting onto the pan or timing cover, but I thought if you ever wreck that, how are you going to undo that? You can't replace an AN fitting if it's welded to the pan, or I guess you hope you don't wreck it. So I just machined a pipe thread fitting and welded it in. But the fool that I was, I welded it a little too close to the pan rail, and it shrunk and warped the rail of the oil pan, which I had to flatten. You'll see that in a little bit. In my turbocharger kit the other day, I found a weldable bung for the oil drain that I didn't know that I already had. So, if you're going to do these, weld them on the inside of the pan. Don't weld them on the outside. That should avoid shrinking over the oil rail. The oil pickup tube was also shortened 2 inches. Cut pretty straightforward. I made some marks on the table to where the legs and the bolt holes were so that I could put them back. One of the support brackets had to be moved, and I needed to make sure it would line up in the exact same place again. So I just lined it up with the marks that I drew on the table and welded her back together. It's just mild steel. I don't think it's stainless, but pretty thin walls, so keep the current down when you're welding it all back together. It all bolted back up into the motor with no issues at all. This is how I dealt with the warped pan rail. Just a mirror or a big thick piece of glass, a couple sheets of sandpaper glued down to it, and then just sand and sand and sand and sand forever. And eventually you get it nice and flat. It took forever, oh my gosh. Then I also used a carbide cutter and some WD-40 as a lubricant and ported the oil passage from the pump through to the filter and back to the oil system on the engine. So a fair bit of casting flash and poor shaping, but really smoothed up the oil passage in that. It's incredibly restrictive. Then we put the pan back on. Kids, never go underneath an engine that's supported only by an engine crane. If it falls, I know you can bench press the world, but that engine is pretty heavy. Plus, when it's falling, you got momentum on working against you too. Cool thing, the timing cover, when you put the timing cover on, it is bolted flush with the bottom rails of the block, and then the rear main seal cover is bolted flush to the rails of the block, and then the oil pan is bolted flush to the torque converter cover on the back. It's like all well thought out and plunked together. Everything works in beautiful harmony. So then I'm just placing the motor, a couple strategically located blocks of wood to get the height such that the pan is no longer below the cross member, and then put the cab on. Of course, unless your vehicle is too low and the cherry picker won't fit underneath the frame rails. Yay. Motor mounts. Yay. If you're looking at this and you're going,
Hey, Mr. Wellwood, isn't that DOM tubing going to be used for some energy suspension 4-link bushes for motor mounts? And isn't that going to transmit a whole bunch of vibration into the whole truck and make you a sad panda?
why, yes, it is. My local metal supermarkets didn't have the right thickness of DOM tubing, but they had something thicker, and I can always cut it thinner. And I think I had a couple 4-link bushes in the shelf, so I just grabbed a couple, and I did get to, with this design, use my wonderful tubing bender. This was taken from gottrikes.com, set of plans I purchased and built this tubing bender, and honestly, I have not used it enough. Nice bender, works great. The motor mount plates, I found a drawing on a website on the internet, printed them out, stuck them on, and discovered they are not quite correct. So I had to elongate some of the holes. The motor mounts are made out of 1/4-inch plate, and then I made some ears out of 3/16. Easy button for the ears is to weld them all together and then drill a hole through all 4 and then grind and shape them so they're all perfect. It gets a little hot, so I got a bucket of water keeping my fingers nice and cool. I like to use gloves. Don't use gloves when using machinery. If the machinery eats the glove, it'll eat your fingers. And dead cow is certainly handy for protecting your skin. TIG welded because it looks nice. TIGging is fun. And I had to make sure that the motor mount cleared the steering. I didn't have the right U-joint in yet, and this is actually before I changed the steering column. That's coming up later. But once it was all placed and everything, it worked out really good, and it just clears the steering dandy. So, nice motor mounts. And removable. That's the way I want them to be. I think I'm working on... I chose the driver's side first, because I'm stupid, I guess. You can see the ears are slightly offset a little bit, just because angles and stuff were interesting, and I wanted to make sure I could get a wrench on the motor plates, the bolts for the motor plates. You can see the welded nut held captive inside the tube on this side, and how it all gets stuck together and welded. I'm getting smarter in welding stuff. A tube like this, if you weld the steel bush in the middle, it's going to change the shape of the tube. So I welded that first, let the tube change its shape, and then I welded it into place. Because sure as shooting, if you made the two ends welded to the tube and then you welded the bush in, it ain't going to line up anymore. Because everything moves when you weld. Oh my gosh. On the motor mount, to try and stop things from moving, you can see I've got a nut and bolt to hold the two ears together so that they don't move. And that actually worked pretty slick. Liner all up. The bolt in goes in from the bottom. Got the plate on, got the ears. Guess I was welding the other side. This isn't necessarily in order. I got like vehicular ADHD. I get into a project and go, I need to do that part of the project. And while I'm doing that, I go, whoa, I need to get onto that part of the project. And I didn't even think of this part of the project. Oh my gosh. What am I doing? Oh, I guess I'm doing the transmission mount. See, I get distracted. I had, again, in my stack of Chevy parts, polyurethane transmission mount. The poly trans mount tends to add a little bit of vibration, which I may not stick with this one, but I had it, so it makes it easy to fabricate. And 3/16 offcuts from when I did the notch in the frame modifications. Bunch of holes, bent it up just to give it some triangulation, so when it's welded to the tube, it's got some strength. Belt sanding goodness. I should really make a stand for the belt sander. And then I'm drilling something. I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, okay, these are the brackets, the ears for the transmission mount. For some drunken reason, I thought I should mill these in the milling machine so they'll be nice and symmetrical and clean at a nice angle. It'll save me hours of grinding. And it did not. I don't think it would have made a difference. A Smart Panda would probably cut them out with a plasma cutter, but I didn't, so whatever. Anyways, sanding, blow a belt, get another belt. I like 36 grit. Oh yeah, I like it rough. That sounds bad. And we got the trans mount going on there. Drilling this was a bugger because I didn't want to remove the whole transmission, but it sure was hard to get a drill inside this. But I got it drilled, and I did not drill into my bicep, tempting though that was. Could have had a couple days off. Oh yeah. The steering column. Oh yes. Now, this truck was a 4-speed, granny low, with a first gear that'll pull a house off its foundation and a second gear that's a little too tall with a whole lot of clutch chatter. I ended up getting a automatic column shift steering column from a 68, and I thought I can probably cannibalize these and make the 61 column a column shift. So I took them all apart, studied them all up, and then had an epiphany. Why would I cannibalize two perfectly good steering columns to make one when I can just adapt the 68 to make it fit, and then I can sell the column from the 61? So that's what I did. Most of the guys with the 67 to 72s like to stuff the steering column about 1.5 inches further toward the dash, so they modify the mounts. Interestingly, the 61 column is 1.5 inches further into the dash than the 68 would be, so I made the column mountable at the 61 height, and I can pull it back out of the dash another 3/4 inch or 1.5 inches. And then put it all together, got it to shift. Nothing actually worked on this, but I took it all apart, got it working, now it shifts, and it works. The 61 wheel is a little bit different. The horn operates differently, so I'm going to have to do some modifications to the 61 wheel to make it work. I fabricated my own shifter linkage, and park lines up with park, and reverse lines up with reverse, and drive lines up with drive, and everything works except low is off the charts. Honestly, with a 6-liter and a turbo, first gear is going to be off the chart. I messed around with the steering because I was there. I'm just cutting a wee slot out of the side of the frame. I still have to go back and do a little bit more, and that's just for the steering shaft to get through. Yeah, I probably should have done that earlier. And then the brakes. This is a weird master cylinder where the brake and the clutch are in the same unit. I CNC plasma cut an adapter that uses the original 61's mount and adapts Hydro Boost from, I think I took from a 2006-ish Silverado. Apparently it gives you amazing brakes. So adapter, Hydro Boost, it's in. Then I think I cleaned up the brackets. I think I glass beaded it and then zinc chromate primered and then sprayed it with just aluminum colored paint. I like painting aluminum with aluminum because then when it chips, you see aluminum. We're hooking up the exhaust. We're plumbing the turbocharger. So stick around for that one. And leave a comment. Tell me everything that I should have done differently because, oh yeah. So take care. Stay in school. Don't do drugs. Eat all your vegetables. Toodles.